So you can't tell us anything about the last couple days?
I was right
No,
here.
you weren't, hon. You just disappeared. You took all your stuff with you. Only thing you left behind was Alden and a note that said goodbye.
My name is Paul Allen. I am a senior animator at It Software in Dallas, Texas, and I'm also a mentor at Animation Mentor. I've taken a look at your winning entry for January, so let me play through it, and then we'll step through and talk about some ideas.
So you can't tell us anything about the last couple days?
I was right here.
No, you weren't, hon. You just disappeared. You took all your stuff with you. Only thing you left behind was Alden and a note that said goodbye.
This is a really fun piece. You've made really good use of strong posing, and it's very pose-to-pose, limited animation style. But that works perfectly because when you're doing these contests, these monthly contests, you have to make good choices, and you have to be able to do them in an efficient manner. So stylized pose-to-pose, limited animation is perfect for this. Thinking about posing just in general, that's the core of telling a story to an audience. So I think you did a really effective job with this in general. It's fun and it hits all the story beats. So I think you did really well there. As far as like areas to improve, always in my own work, I look for strengthening posing. That is the key to telling the audience what's going on and maximizing appeal for whatever it is you're doing, because you're painting a picture of what is happening, and that's how the audience will tell what's going on. Part of it is, not just the motion, but is like establishing what is going on. So like with this, this piece from the Men in Black, we're establishing that he's agent number 2. So we know there's an agent number 1 somewhere. It says right there. We're establishing that she's really nervous and that he's asking questions. You have him higher, which puts him in a position of power, and she's more nervous, so she's down lower. So you're leaning into that, and I think that's really cool. Probably, it looks like it's intentionally leaving this area open over here. So I don't know if you necessarily had to leave that area open, because I know that we pan over when the second character comes in, but we don't have to foreshadow that for the audience. We could probably bring the composition in something like this, just so that it's a little bit tighter, and it puts her, try to thinking about like rule of thirds. So where are we on that type of landscape? Getting her down more into this area, and him being up in this area is never bad, because it'll get it along those some key points as far as like when you're thinking about how to break up composition, and it gets rid of dead space around it, and it lets the viewer focus on what is visually necessary. You don't want to get like too close. I mean, that's really intimidating, but you lose a lot with that. The scrubbing through here, let me turn this volume down just a little bit. Scrubbing through here, I think the pose change is effective. I was looking at this first pose, like her pose and his pose especially, is that the hands, he has really big hands. So just be mindful of like how you present that to the camera, is that when I look at it like this, I can't visually break up easily break up what is the thumbs and what are the fingers. So just strengthening that pose, maybe turning it a little bit less fingers towards camera. It's pretty foreshortened right now. So just turning that a little bit, and maybe bringing the fingers down, breaking up their angles so they're not perfectly spread apart, and distinguishing those thumbs up there. And so that might give you a little bit visually a stronger pose. The placement is pretty good, but you're thinking that he's putting pressure on his hands too. So it's not just like they're just there. He's putting pressure on them, and he's sort of pressuring, like when I do it, I pressure and I'm leaning a little bit. It's very deliberate that you're pressing those together. So you want to show that contact. As far as her hand poses, I think her hand poses are looking good. Her poses in general feel pretty good, and she feels pretty authentic. The same thing on looking at her hands is that they're very even as far as how they're laid out. So you could just take a look at that and see how you're wrapping the fingers around the other hand and see if you could just break it up a little bit more. That might be nice. Pose changes are feeling good. The amount that you're bending the limbs, right here, you got some bend. You could possibly make this more of a straight and then leave that bent. That would give it a little bit more visual variety. The bends on them right now are pretty similar. So it goes from shapes like this to where you're connecting a straight against a curve. So that might be nice as well. Take a look and make sure that her eye line, that it feels like her eye line is looking at his face. Right now, it's hard to tell because her iris and pupil are so dark. It's just dark shapes, but she could be potentially sort of looking off past this way. So just that's something I play around with, is like, especially when I'm getting to polish, is if I have two characters interacting, I'll look at like their eye lines and make sure that they're representing where they're supposed to be looking at, because it can be really easy for audience members to get that feeling that they're not looking at each other. And somebody watching it may not even point that out or be able to articulate that, but just something will feel slightly off, because faces are really important. And we're always looking at other people's faces, because that's where we get a lot of nonverbal communication, is from seeing what's going on, and looking at the eyes is super important. So that's something to think of. I like that you're changing breaking up the shapes. Just look at what's going on with the teeth. It looks like the teeth are a little bit broken. You might be able to get a little bit more appealing shapes. Make sure and breaking the teeth up to where they don't feel like you can see gaps underneath through the movement. And that's just polishing stuff. This movie, here's where some of the multiples come in, like right here. I thought that was really funny. I don't know if you use multiples in a few spots, so I thought it was fun, but I don't know if it was 100% necessary. And this movement right here, going into this pose change from here down to here, over to here, it was so complex, and it was such a complex arc that you're going from here back over to here and then down here, and then switching here, and you're bending the head a lot, and it's in such a big area to cover a space where he was actually like right over here. So you ended up going around the horn quite a bit to get to the same spot. That is really just that you could have just shifted down to it and like got some nice drag on the head and then overlapped down into it. So you could have made it still a little bit fancy. It just feels like it was just, and this is totally personal opinion, that it was a little bit overdone on that one. But the rest of them feel pretty cool. So like right here, same thing with the hands. You could look at those hand shapes and how you're tilting them. This is fun. I love this camera and her changing pose to recognize Agent One. The same thing here with her eye line is that she feels like, to me, she is looking over here. So bringing that up a little bit more, so she's looking more at him, would be nice. Even right there, just bringing her head, maybe bringing her turning her head around this way, just so that she's looking a little bit more at him. And that's one of those things that you can play around with. And I use this is one of the things I would use, may use animation layers on to test out, like where I'm adjusting heads and eye lines and things. Test it out, see how it's going. If you don't like it, you can delete that layer. It's non-destructive. So that's another idea. Same thing here. She looks a little bit like she's looking up and past his head. And then this shift right here is really cool because it brings her face back into frame, and it's just here on the edge, which is really cool. And just to look on her face, she looks really worried. As far as like where he ends up with this notepad, compositionally, you might be able to place that in a slightly different area, to where maybe it's more like down here, or maybe even a little bit lower, to where we have a little bit more of a triangle going as far as its placement, because right now it's more in line with the head. So just compositionally, you like designing things in centers of interest in a triangular fashion. Sometimes is a fun way to start, or an easy way to start, because that gives your eye an interesting area to travel around. So that would be another thing to think about with this. Overall, I think as far as doing it in an efficient manner is the way to go on challenges like this, because the intent is to present it with appealing posing and trying to tell the story that way. When she shifts to here, the angle of her line of action here, and then the angle of her head, you could possibly, if you're going to leave her head there, you could shift it to where maybe get her line of action on her spine, going down into her spine, down in her torso. Maybe you could slide that over a little bit, that angle over, so it doesn't feel like the neck is quite so bent against the head. So bringing it more to where she's looking like this, and maybe it's flowing out a little bit more like that. I think it's cool that also on the two agents, we don't have pupils on them, or pupils or irises. So you're just going based off of the facial expression. So I think that's pretty effective as well. Overall, I think you did a really good job on this piece. My only other note when I'm watching it overall,
You can't tell us anything about the last couple days.
is that outside of this pose change feeling a little bit much for what it might need to be, is to take a look at the audio and make sure that when you finalize and hit your poses, that they feel like they are hitting along the audio track where you want. I would say like this one.
Tell us anything about the last couple days.
Is that it says last couple of days, and then maybe that's where you want the hit to land. It feels like it lands a little bit afterwards, and that can be that can happen when you're planning it out. You have your storytelling poses, you block your poses in, your main story poses, and then once you get to animating, then hitting that beat may get slid a little bit because you're overlapping into it, and it may delay, and you may end up pushing the beat that you had a good hit on a little bit late. So that's something else you can look at. But overall, really fun job. And I laughed. So mission accomplished. So congratulations again, and good luck in the future.